kind of random.
What does joining Hip Hop Now's Patreon mean? It means supporting the kind of hip-hop content that keeps you updated on the latest hip-hop news and moves. It means supporting the production of content like That Time in Hip Hop and Hip Hop Now Reviews. It means you care about the conversation and preservation of hip-hop music and culture. Hip Hop Now Patreon supporters get access to bonus content, merchandise, and more. Support the movement. Become a supporter of Hip Hop Now podcast today at patreon.com/Hip Hop Now.
Coming up on this week's episode of Hip Hop Now podcast, live from Podcast Movement Evolutions, but it's my review of the Tupac Shakur Museum Experience, Wake Me When I'm Free. Let's do it.
Let's get right to the business.
Read these headlines. This album must be gone. This album must be gone.
Classic album.
Permanent Hip Hop Podcast.
What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast designed to catch you up on all things hip-hop music and culture that happen throughout the week. Big shout out to the producers of this podcast, the people who support this podcast to bring it to you every week with enhancement, with exclusives like this. Now, if you've heard the intro, hopefully you did. Hopefully you didn't skip anything. Or if you follow me on social media, whether that be Twitter or Instagram, at Vegas World INC, you will know that I am currently attending the Podcast Movement Evolutions Conference. So some of you may have heard of Podcast Movement, that conference. This is a little bit different. That the conference you heard of happens in August. If you're from the future, you already know what to do. You need to get your punk ass out of here. But Podcast Movement Evolutions is more or less your standard media conference, right? So the conference that most people are used to is more of like a party, tends to be more so creator-based, right? For those people who create podcasts. But this particular version of the conference is a mix of creator-based, industry professionals, so on and so forth. So in so many words, it's bigger sponsors. Let's just say that. iHeartRadio's out here, Audible, Spotify, couple of different places like that, right? I am out here because if you don't know, I work in radio, but we have a podcasting division called WBGO Studios, more of a digital content creating sector of a public media. And the thing is of course I'm out here for work, but why would I not do a couple of things for Hip Hop Now podcasts and the faithful that listen? So, arrived out here, arrived at the hotel, look across the street, and I'm like, oh, look at all those, Tupac signs in downtown LA with some quotes from some lyrics, right? I thought it was just, things that were pinned up. But then I remember, like, wait a minute, I've seen those before. And I was like, oh, wait, there's a whole building there. Wait a minute, it's a museum dedicated to Tupac. So Tupac Shakur, Wake Me When I'm Free, is a museum experience. They refer to it as a groundbreaking museum experience, which is now open and only in Los Angeles for a limited time at LA Live. There's their plug, right? There's their plug because, they are not sponsoring this podcast. But I am basically reading it. So I decided, I was like, well, knowing that, it's right across the street from me. So when I'm done with my duties at the conference, I'm going to make time to go over there and check it out and review it. And I got to be honest with y'all, because it was a limited exhibit, my expectations were not high. Not that it would be bad. My expectations just weren't high, because usually if it's limited, then that means, well, that was something that's there and, it's temporary. So I'm not expecting anything extravagant at all, for a limited museum experience or exhibit. So, I'll walk in, get my ticket, walk in, the first opening, and I'll share some photos on my social media, my Twitter and my Instagram at VegasWorldINC. So I walk in, right? And I'm not going to sit here and describe the entire museum, but when you walk in, it's just all white room, right? With all these, everything is white in there, and there's a bunch of sculptures and statues, right? When you walk in. So I was like, oh, this is dope. This looks like like a video, like a music video set or something like that. But, I should have worn my shiny suit. But it took me a couple of seconds to realize, oh, wait a minute. All the sculptures and all the things on the wall are sculptures of Tupac tattoos. And as you walk over to each one, there's a little description of why Tupac chose to get this tattoo and why he chose to get that tattoo. So some of the tattoos that you're used to seeing on his body, like Tupac or Thug Life or Nefertiti, on his body, there was literally, an exhibit for each, right? Or a display for each. So I thought that was pretty dope. And then you walk into one room. After that, you walk into this room that's closed for a moment. And you walk in and it's, it's dark and it's surrounded, there's like the screen that surrounds the entire room. And it's like an intro video that focuses on a lot of, Black Power stuff. Some, Black Lives Matter stuff is in the video, mainly talking about Black people in America and the struggle really related to Tupac, even if it includes certain things he was not alive for. So I thought it was a nice primer. And honestly, I thought that was the end of the exhibit, because I thought it was something that was just small. Like, hey, here's some cool things. I thought they was going to show us, a couple videos, maybe the history of Tupac, him talking, blah, 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 in this room. Well, the video ends quick. Lights go out. And then this dude opens a door. And not only is it way more people in this building than I initially thought, because I didn't realize there was a whole other full-blown museum behind that door. Now, I know some people, you think you bad. Well, yeah, everybody, dog. I had no expectations for this. So, as you can see, I was pleasantly surprised. So, the museum as a whole, and things that I definitely liked about it, was the fact that it starts with Afeni Shakur and the Black Panther Party. Literally a section that is dedicated to that. And it was really dope because you're wearing headphones and you're basically using this device to point it at each, display. And a story is told or something is played in your headphones, right? Typically whatever's on like the TV if they have it there. And, I'm sitting there listening to this and looking at this. I'm like, this is pretty dope because this is a nice deep dive into Afeni if you don't already know her history. And the next exhibit, you walk right out and now it's young Tupac, like baby Tupac. Well, maybe not baby, but you know what I'm saying? Like really young, little kid. And it's all these like, I don't know how they still had some of these things. Put it this way. If they had, Tupac's poems from when he was little, or just things he wrote from when he was like a kid, you better believe, because it happened, they literally had so much in this museum that was Tupac's actual writing, from rhymes to him writing down different track listings with different titles of albums. Some you know, some you don't know. Some were, the album you do know, but he must have changed the title somewhere along the line. So if it's like, Thugs Live Forever, maybe that was the original title to Me Against the World. So it's all this writing that you could see, and it's like a history of him writing in his handwriting that you see throughout the museum. That's just so dope. Even down to letters, people wrote him, letters he wrote to other people when he was in jail. Really, really dope. But as you go through the exhibit, you literally go through Tupac's career, his entire career from the beginning. So when he was a little boy, when he was a teenager, things that influenced him. They had like this one display that was a bunch of TVs, and on the TVs were different things that influenced him. LL Cool J videos, things from the 80s, which was for somebody like me, who grew up in the 80s, it was extremely nostalgic because, sure, certain things came from the 80s and you have a memory, right? And you have a nostalgia factor. But when you're looking at this stack of TVs playing all these things from an era at the same time, and everything wasn't hip hop, it brings you back to that time you remember in a deeper way than, I had imagined when I saw it. So I was like, wow, that's pretty dope. But that was just literally the beginning. And you're constantly going through and you're looking at walls full of rhymes, right? Some rhymes you never even heard of before. I took pictures, so at Vegas World INC on social media. But there's walls full of writings, poems, again, rhymes you never heard before. Some rhymes you did on albums, some rhymes on some of those, unreleased joints. Then there's another wall with film scripts and stories. And it's just like, when you look at something like that, and this is throughout his history, you realize, you're talking about somebody who was a true artist in a lot of regards. Because some rappers, they're not that focused on their craft to be to consistently write. Now, let's not forget Tupac died at a very young age, and me being an MC, I remember having books of rhymes with some rhymes were unfinished. Some rhymes just had like the title on the page or the title in a line, and he never really finished it. Or something that was really complete, right? A title with a drawing to reflect the title and then the bars. And when you read them, you damn sure read them in Tupac's voice. I'm going to just say that. I was reading a couple of them joints. Now, for some of y'all who want to know, I didn't look that hard, but I didn't see Enemies or Hennessy. I know it was there somewhere, but I didn't see it. But nevertheless, I just thought that was a dope part of the exhibit. But as you walk through, right, you see in him as a little kid, and you get to him as a teenager. You get to him during the time when he was in, things he did when he was in Baltimore, like clothes, stuff like that. Well, not necessarily clothes. It's the stuff he wore when he was not MC New York, but when he first started rhyming and performing. And when you look at that version of Tupac, the version that Digital Underground knew before he became the Tupac we know, it was extremely pro-black, right? I mean, red, black, and green color outfits. You know what I'm saying? He had the X-Clan jewelry, everything. And it was like, wow, like, I wonder what that version of Tupac would have been like as an artist. We know he was still some of that in his music, but he kind of played the, you know, the Black Panther rapper, but he also played the thug life rapper. But I looking at the early stages of him as an MC, it made me wonder, like, wow, what if that was the only lane he was ever in? You know, would he have been as big as he was, you know, or as popular or as famous? You know, because when you think about the time, right, that Tupac reigned from, you know, mid 2000s, I mean mid 90s to late 90s, you know that pro-black style from when he was younger was a era, a specific era where people rocked medallions, you know, and like really like a Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, X-Clan, like around those times where it was, you know, cats weren't wearing jewelry anymore. They were dressing really pro-black. But that era died. So I think it was to Tupac's benefit that his music didn't only focus on that, because it kind of gave him more longevity than, you know, the average rapper who really only did that one thing at that one time where it was popular. So it then goes on to go through his film career, right? Juice, Poetic Justice, Above the Rim, literally going through his film as his career in movies at that specific time. And it's weaved in with the albums he dropped around that time, right? Tupacalypse Now, his debut, Strictly for My Niggas, Me Against the World. And then obviously you see the section where he gets shot and he goes to prison. And then there's a part of the exhibit that is the prison part, right? So the interviews he did in jail, the letters from people, you know, who were trying to get him out, documents, you know, court documents, all kinds of stuff. It's a really deep dive. And the quad, you know, the quad studio shooting thing was there as well, right before the whole jail thing. Because again, remember, it's like walking through Tupac's timeline, career-wise. But when you come out of the exhibit part, then boom, you know where you are, right? Tupac's free. He's on death row. He's got all this music he's recording. And, you know, you kind of go through that. I'm not going to spoil everything. Then later there's a portion of the exhibit that's death row Tupac, but with a bunch of outfits, right? From that time, like, you know, right, 95, 96. And it's really dope because if you were a Tupac fan or even just following hip hop and seeing videos from him or seeing him appear at certain places, you remember the outfits, right? Like they had the outfit, or the not necessarily the entire outfit, but the top that he wore on the cover, All Eyes on Me, that's there. They had a couple of things, you know, some stuff from photo shoots, the outfit he wore at the Grammys. Also, one that stood out for me, because I remember when he passed, I Ain't Mad at You, the timing of that video and seeing Tupac in heaven was surreal, because, you know, he had just passed. And the first new video you see of him is him getting shot and killed. And then he's rapping from heaven. It was just you'd ever seen because of, you know, what happened in reality. Well, the suit he had on, the all-white suit from the video, was also there. And one thing that was kind of cool, if you grew up in the 90s, is to look at the outfits, right? The joints he dressed up in and some of the regular clothes, right? Like the sneakers, like that they had in there. I was looking like, wow, these are worth nothing now. Or these look like the cheapest sneakers ever, but they were hot back then in the 90s. Same thing with like some of the baggy jeans, which was super baggy. Some of the shirts, even when he had his dress up clothes, right? A lot of Dolce and Gabbana shoes, Versace, things like that. So it was pretty dope. Towards the end, they have this, I guess this nice like corridor with all these rose petals falling, and there's a quote from Tupac regarding roses and growing in concrete and stuff like that, and it kind of leads you to the last picture that was taken of him before he was shot, and then the exhibit ends or whatever. So all in all, having gone through all of that, I was pleasantly surprised, almost like really, well, what they say, taken aback. Like it really caught me off guard how good this was, how deep it was of an experience. I just did not expect to walk into, a exhibit where there's a studio set up, old school studio board too, and all these dats from him making All Eyes on Me, like the actual dats. And it was just so dope. Not dats, but reel-to-reels and stuff like that. And tapes, all kinds of different technologies, some of which we don't really even use anymore. And I was just really caught off guard by how deep the journey was. Put it this way, if I had to compare it to something, I'd say if you watch the All Eyes on Me movie and you sort of felt some kind of way because it felt like a long video and it didn't really spend much time, teaching you about Tupac if you don't know him on an intimate level, or teaching you something about him you don't know. And I kind of felt like this exhibit was a better experience than that movie because the way it starts, like the depth in which you learn about his mother in the Black Panther Party and the effects on him, right? It's not just this quick scene that happens and it's like, boom, that's why Tupac is, pro-Black, and that's the end. It was a much deeper experience, more personal experience. I mean, even down to him getting arrested and brutalized by cops, right? And I've always known that, but I never saw the videos and pictures of his face after it. So it's kind of one of those things where you just leave this place that if you love Tupac, you'll love this exhibit. Trust me, you will love it. If you ain't really get into his music, but you dug some of the stuff he did, or you don't really know that much about Tupac beyond, unfortunately, some of his music and the fact that, he was killed when he was young, this will give you a greater appreciation of why people feel the way they feel about Tupac. For the short amount of time that he was here, the short amount of time that he was extremely successful in hip hop, this brother did a lot to impact the music and the minds of people who loved him and his music. And I just felt like, wow, this should be my show for the week. Me reviewing this should be what I do because it's just such a dope experience for hip hop. I would love to see this kind of experience for other rappers, obviously Biggie Smalls, but not necessarily just the people who passed on, right? I would just love to see this much dedicated to some of the greats in the game. And I know, there's a hip hop museum that broke ground, should be around in maybe 2 years, I think, to visit. I don't know how deep and how big of an experience it's going to be. But just this one experience of going through Tupac's life is extremely dope. So you can look it up online, Tupac Shakur, Wake Me When I'm Free. It's a museum exhibit, currently limited to LA. Doesn't mean it won't come anywhere else, but this is where it is, downtown LA, LA Live. What do you think about Tupac Shakur? Maybe you've been here. Maybe you've experienced this museum. Leave your comments in the comment section wherever you get this podcast. Also, please know, subscribing, reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts, all of it helps out. But most importantly, you share it with people you know enjoy this kind of content. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic, I'm a fan. Peace.
Drop it on the random.